Let me tell you something about confidence. Real confidence is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't need to perform, and it never needs an audience. What this man had, that wasn't confidence. That was arrogance wearing confidence like a tailored suit. And for a long time, nobody in my family could tell the difference, including my own daughter. Until the night I decided to show him exactly what the difference looked like. My name is Julian Vance. I am 58 years old, and this story begins in the formal gardens of my estate in Lake Forest, Illinois. It was the night of my daughter Clara's engagement party. Carol, my wife of 33 years, had spent 6 weeks planning every detail. There were white cherry blossoms lining the stone pathways, a string quartet playing on the lawn, and servers moving like well-dressed ghosts, keeping glasses filled. Clara looked breathtaking. She wore a cream silk dress, her dark hair pinned up, laughing with her cousins near the marble fountain. She caught my eye from across the garden and gave me the same smile she'd given me since she was 4 years old. The one that meant everything was perfect, Dad. I raised my glass to her, a genuine smile on my face. Whatever my reservations about her fiancé, Austin Mercer, my daughter was happy. And a father does not stand in the way of his daughter's happiness. Austin was a polished corporate climber. I had recently promoted him to Vice President of Operations at Vance Logistics, my shipping and commercial real estate firm. He was smart, but he was the specific type of smart that believes everyone else in the room is simple. I had stepped away from the main gathering to check on the caterers near the side terrace. The terrace was bordered by tall arrangements of white blossoms, partially obscuring the stone pillars. I was standing behind one of those pillars, checking a text from our event coordinator, when I heard voices around the corner. It was Austin and his close friend, corporate lawyers from the city. 35 million, man, the friend said, his voice loose from the champagne. Vance Logistics is valued at 35 million. The old man has no other heirs. You're set for life. Keep your voice down, Austin replied, though I could hear the smug satisfaction in his tone. Julian is still working the room. I'm proud of you, his friend laughed. When you first started dating Clara, I thought you were just playing the field. But look at you now, the future CEO of Vance Logistics. Between you and me, Austin's voice dropped, carrying the cold arrogance of a man who believed he was completely alone in the world. Clara is a sweet girl. She's naive, she's emotional, and she's easy to manage. But this, the company, the estate, the legacy, this is the actual plan. You don't find a takeover opportunity like this twice in a career. Once I'm married and named successor, the old man can retire to his Florida home, and I'll run the board my way. I stood behind that pillar of cherry blossoms, my glass of champagne held perfectly still. I didn't walk around the pillar. I didn't confront him in front of our guests. I didn't start an explosion that would leave my daughter defensive and heartbroken in front of her friends. I did something much better. I stepped back quietly into the shadows, fixed my expression, and walked back to the garden. The trap was set, and Austin Mercer was going to walk to the center of it all by himself. Frank, Carol said, excusing herself from a conversation the moment she saw my face. She has known my expressions for over 3 decades. There is no point in trying to hide anything from her. What happened? I need you to trust me, Carol, I whispered, leaning close. And I need you to act completely normal for the rest of this evening. No questions. Not yet. She pulled back, her steady gray eyes searching mine. Then, she lifted her glass and said at full social volume, Well, I think the cherry blossoms look absolutely perfect tonight, don't you? That is the woman I married. At the end of the night, Austin came up to me, offering a firm handshake and a practiced, warm smile. Thank you for the party, Julian. It means the world to us. Welcome to the family, Austin, I said, matching his warmth. In fact, I have an investment opportunity I'd like to run by you next week. Something to secure your position with Clara before the wedding. I watched the excitement flash in his eyes before he controlled it. I'd love that, Julian, he said smoothly. The next morning, I called Marcus Thorne, our family attorney of 19 years. Marcus is a slow-speaking, high-billing lawyer who has never once been wrong about a contract. I told him what I had heard and what I wanted to construct. Julian, Marcus said after a long pause, that is the cleanest, most devastating corporate trap I have ever been asked to draft. Can you get him to sign it? Austin believes he is the smartest man in Illinois, I said. He'll sign it. 3 days later, I called Austin and invited him to lunch at the Midday Club, an exclusive business club on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper. It was a venue that signaled extreme wealth and legitimacy, precisely the kind of environment where a man like Austin would feel completely at ease. I arrived early, sat with my back to the wall, and opened the leather portfolio on the table. Austin arrived exactly 2 minutes early, punctual, polished, and confident. We ordered our meals, and he spoke about Clara with the perfect, rehearsed level of devotion. He was good at his performance. Then, I slid the first document across the table. Here is the outline of the Vance Family Heritage Fund, I said. Carol and I are consolidating 20% of our corporate shares, valued at roughly $7 million, into a trust for you and Clara, with you named as the managing trustee. I watched him do the math in his head. It took him 2 seconds, and then he spent the next 4 seconds pretending not to be thrilled. There is just one formality, Austin, I said, sliding the second document forward. A standard premarital disclosure. Because you will have trustee control over family assets, my attorneys require a signed declaration confirming that your interest in the Vance family and our corporate holdings is purely personal and not motivated by any independent financial gain or takeover intentions. Standard corporate protocol. The document was dense, filled with legal jargon, but built around one specific clause. If the signer was found to have acted with fraudulent intent regarding the family assets, the contract was void, and they faced immediate termination for cause with zero compensation. Austin studied it. He spent 4 minutes reading the pages, wanting to appear thorough but not hesitant. He didn't want to show a single sliver of doubt to the man who was holding the keys to his future. No issues here, Austin said, pulling out his pen, and he signed it. What Austin didn't realize was that the notary sitting at the small table behind us was a member of Marcus Thorne's legal team, and the small black device in my breast pocket had captured every second of our conversation. I shook his hand, smiled, and watched him walk out of the restaurant, his shoulders relaxed with the stride of a man who believed he had just conquered the Vance empire. I took out my phone and called Marcus. It's signed. Excellent, Marcus replied. I'll file the notarized declaration in the private vault. Now we wait. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly preparing. I didn't want a scene. I wanted a clinical, absolute resolution. I asked Clara to come to the main estate on a Friday morning, telling her only that her mother and I needed to discuss the wedding contracts. She arrived at 8 a.m., looking nervous. Carol and I sat with her in the library, and I laid out the truth. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her exactly what I had heard behind the stone pillar at her engagement party. I played the audio recording of Austin's voice, cold and arrogant, describing her as easy to manage and the company as the actual plan. I watched my daughter's face go pale. The light in her eyes simply went out, replaced by a quiet, devastating stillness. He said that, she whispered, her hands trembling. He did, Clara, I said, placing the legal folder on the table. I built this folder so you wouldn't have to wonder if it was a misunderstanding. Here is the transcript, the notarized declaration, and the recording. Clara stared at the folder for a long time. Then, she looked up, her voice steady and quiet. I want to be in the room when you end this, Dad. Are you sure, sweetheart? Carol asked. Yes, Clara said, her jaw tight. He did this to me. I want to see the door close. Austin arrived at our corporate headquarters at 9 a.m. on Monday, expecting a formal meeting to finalize the trust partnership. He walked into the executive conference room with his usual confident stride, carrying his leather briefcase. But when he saw the room, his stride faltered. I sat at the head of the table. Carol sat to my left, and Marcus Thorne sat to my right with a thick blue portfolio. Clara sat at the far end, her face completely still, her eyes locked on the glass table. Julian, Clara, is everything okay? Austin asked, his voice wavering slightly. Sit down, Austin, I said quietly. He took a seat, looking at the blue portfolio. Marcus Thorne opened the folder and laid 3 documents side by side on the glass table. Mr. Mercer, we are here to discuss your termination for cause from Vance Logistics and the immediate voiding of your engagement contracts. Austin let out a nervous laugh. What are you talking about? This is a joke, right? Clara didn't answer. She didn't even blink. This, Marcus said, touching the first document. is the notarized declaration you signed at the midday club, confirming you had no financial motivations regarding this family. This second document is the certified transcript and audio recording of your conversation at the engagement party, detailing your plan to execute a corporate takeover and push Mr. Vance out of his company. Austin's face went completely gray. He stared at the documents, his hands beginning to shake on the table. The contradiction between your signed statement and your recorded words constitutes fraudulent inducement and corporate perjury, Marcus explained. Under the terms of your contract, you are terminated immediately for cause. You are entitled to 0 severance, and your corporate shares are voided. Julian, please, Austin stammered, looking at me. It was just talk. We were drinking. I love Clara. Austin turned to Clara, his voice desperate. Clara, you know me. We've been together for 2 years. You can't let them do this. I was just stupid. Please. Clara looked at him. The warmth he had spent 2 years manipulating was completely gone, replaced by a cold, absolute boundary. I literally apologized to you last week for not trusting you enough when you were working late, Clara said, her voice barely rising above a whisper. I don't want to hear your voice, Austin. I don't want an apology, and I don't want to see you in this city again. We're done. She stood up, pushed her chair in quietly, and walked out of the conference room. She closed the door gently behind her, the soft click of the lock sounding like a gavel falling in a courtroom. Marcus Thorne slid the final document across the table. This is a non-disclosure and reputational liability agreement, Marcus said. It protects Clara and the Vance family. If you ever discuss this situation, the company, or Clara publicly, privately, or in any digital format, the financial penalties are. Marcus looked at me. Obliterating, I said flatly. Obliterating, Marcus confirmed. Sign it, and we will allow you to resign quietly without filing criminal fraud charges. Refuse, and this folder goes to the federal prosecutor and every logistics board in Chicago by noon. Austin looked at the pen in his hand. He had spent his entire career building a network of corporate connections, trying to climb the ladder of D.C. and Chicago society. He knew that if this folder became public, his career was finished, and he faced real prison time. His hand shook as he signed the document. He pulled the engagement ring from his pocket, set it on the glass table, and stood up. I walked him to the elevator myself. I wanted to be the last thing he saw as he left my company. As the elevator doors slid shut, I watched his face. He looked small, defeated, and completely irrelevant. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Clara and Carol traveled to Europe, spending a month in a quiet villa near Florence, Italy. Clara called me from a vineyard at sunset. Her voice over the phone carried a lightness I hadn't heard since before she met Austin. She was laughing, a real, genuine laugh, telling me about a mistake Carol had made while trying to order dinner in Italian. Hearing that laugh was worth every single hour I had spent building the trap. Austin Mercer left Chicago. He moved to a small logistics firm in Denver, working a mid-level manager role, far away from the boardrooms and the luxury estates he had hoped to inherit. His corporate network in Illinois was permanently closed to him. Vance Logistics continued to grow. I promoted a long-term director who had earned his position through decades of loyalty and hard work, rather than corporate politics. Every Sunday night, Clara comes to the estate for dinner. We don't talk about Austin, and we don't talk about the trap. But we sit in the library, reviewing the company's expansion plans, and she asks the sharp, intelligent questions of a woman who is ready to run the business the right way. She is no longer the naive girl Austin thought he could manage. She is the successor to the Vance legacy, and she built her own strength in the silence of that storm. I stood in the garden as the sun began to set, the warm light reflecting off the marble fountain. I felt an absolute, quiet peace. If this story reminded you that real strength is quiet, and that a father's protection is built on boundaries, leave the word "protected" in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you on our next journey.